How you doing, Internet? Vidya James here. We're 2 days away, officially 2 days away from Nintendo's E3, like pretty much the only E3 anybody really cares about. So I was just going over some of my old videos. I did, some of you might remember, put a link up here, that I did a 50 characters for Smash thing that I did like 2 years ago. Then I did a Redux. So I think this time around, I'm gonna do a little four top tens for Smash that I'm looking forward to. Especially because it's weird. Like my number one overall draft pick for Smash was Inkling, and that we were already gonna get that in. So the first of the four is gonna be my top 10 using notes here. Top 10 obscure characters that are really long shots for making it in. And the characters that some people that have been around a long time, like really old characters in some cases. So basically, starting from the least obscure to the most obscure. At number 10, Strider Hiryu. Yes, yes, I know. He's in the Marvel vs. Capcom games, but some people only know him from the Marvel vs. Capcom games. My first experience with Strider was from the arcade game, which was also ported to the Genesis, and then also the NES game that was adapted for it. That actually kind of more closely followed the Strider manga than the arcade game did. But again, outside of sorry, it's kind of warm in here because I can't have AC running. But outside of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which was its first appearance in decades, I think, and the Strider 2 game I think that came out after it, and then Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and then Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. There's just not many people seem to know him beyond that. But he's actually technically a manga character. That's another reason why I think he's kind of a obscure character and mostly a long shot, because he was originally a manga character that did get a video game. And if Strider makes it into Smash, then technically that opens the door for Goku. And not a character I want to see in Smash, but he already had his own game. He already had his own Smash game. It was called Battle Stadium DOM. So, number 9, another ninja from the arcade games, Shinobi. I believe the original Shinobi from the arcade games, and I think the NES and Sega Master System consoles was Joe Musashi. I think his name might have been. In the PlayStation 2 game, his name I think was Hotsuma. And but Shinobi is a longtime Sega standby, and like many franchises that aren't Sonic, or should I say, every franchise that isn't Sonic, Sega seems to not give a damn. So, right. Number 8. Kind of, but not really obscure because she's been showing up a lot on recent games, especially on Steam. Gianna of the Gianna Sisters. Gianna actually goes back quite a ways. In fact, most of the characters that will be on my list, most characters that show up in video games in general, especially in Smash Brothers, Gianna predates a good chunk of them. Gianna came out, I believe, on the Amiga and Commodore 64 just after Super Mario Brothers came out on the NES. And it was not subtle ripoff. There's no other way to put that. I mean, the stages were the first stage is almost an exact one for one ripoff. It had a fantastic soundtrack, but almost rightfully so, and not expectedly, not surprisingly, Nintendo put this kibosh on the Gianna Sisters, and they pretty much were done. And ironically, they would actually come back with Gianna Sisters on the DS, with the art direction by Picomi, an artist I actually did follow on DeviantArt. And then Gianna Sisters Twisted Dreams will be another game that came out after that. But I'm going back with Gianna from way back in the day. I actually have Super Mario Brothers on the Commodore 64, which was a ROM hack of the Gianna Sisters, and it's just kind of weird. It was just a weird. That was a weird time for games back then. Number 7, kind of obscure, but there's just an old series that hasn't gotten a game in a very long time. Bob and Bob from Bubble Bobble. I believe the last time they got a game might have been Bubble Bobble Old and New, which I think was a GBA game, but it was a seminal arcade game. Like almost any arcade you could walk into will most likely had Bubble Bobble in it. It was just one of those arcade games that almost every arcade had, and almost everybody from my generation played at one point or another. But but again, like it's kind of sad that they haven't really gotten new games. But like there's not much you can do with them. I admit. Number 6, Wonder Momo from the Wonder Momo game. It was an old arcade game that I used to play in in an arcade, a very specific arcade in Baguio in the Philippines. I only got to play it once or twice, and then I never got a shot to play it again until ROM started becoming a thing. I believe Wonder Momo is now on was more recently put on Wii Virtual Console because Wii Virtual Console was doing a lot of arcade games. So I think that's the most recent version of that. And I do believe Wonder Momo did get a more recent comic, but she's not really known for being a long-standing video game character. I think that might have actually been another, like Strider, another manga that was turned into a video game. Number 5, really iffy because of where the copyrights stand on these. Either Lin Kurosawa or Dutch Schaefer from the Aliens vs. Predator arcade beat 'em up. One of my favorite games of one of my all-time favorite beat 'em ups. If I might do a top 10 a list of top 10 beat 'em ups, and Alien vs. Predator is definitely up there. I would say Alien vs. Predator might be one of the top 3 like side-scrolling beat 'em ups of all time. They were really cool characters. It was a really fun game. You had there were 2 characters, the 2 human characters you could play. The other 2 was a Predator Hunter and a Predator Warrior. And you didn't just fight aliens. You fought also. I think there was a Mad Predator that you ended up fighting, and you ended up also having to fight humans. There was it was a really good story, and that was just when Capcom was really hot. So like all the CPS2 boards were really pumping it out. I think at the same time Punisher was also up, but that wasn't really that good of a game. But as my friend Silent Matt will tell you, it had probably one of the best sound effects in the entirety of video game. And just if you grab them, like if in most especially Capcom beat 'em ups, you would have some kind of a move that got everybody off of you. It would be like your special attack. Some of the Konami games did that too. And like for him it would be a foot sweep, or if he was grabbing an enemy, he would grab and swing him. But he had this thing where he would just go, Hoi! It was just like that was such an unhuman sound that nobody would ever make. And I think Nick Fury, who was player 2, would be like, hurrah, hurrah! Like, I'll probably put a clip up of that shit, but it was just so freaking hilarious. But like I said, Lin Kurosawa and Dutch Schaefer were really cool original characters that they made for the game. But I think the closest thing you would ever have to another appearance, I think Lin Kurosawa was in the background of Ryu's stage in the original Street Fighter 3, that bathing era. I think she was with Cammy and Chun-Li way in the back. I do think she appears in almost all of the card fighter games that you would see by Namco, like Card Fighters Clash. But outside of that, she hasn't really made much of an appearance, and probably because she was part of that tie-in game, we might not ever see it again. But I think they were really cool characters, and I would like to see them again. But that was a Capcom beat 'em up, so maybe because Capcom's already got 2 characters in them, you'll see quite a few Capcom characters on these lists coming up. Number 4, really obscure. Most of these are arcade games or just games I used to play back when I was a kid. But DJ Boy, which was another side-scrolling beat 'em up, but like you might expect, it was like DJ. Well, not might expect, but almost like a precursor to Jet Set Radio. It was a side-scrolling beat 'em up where the 2 characters are on roller skates, and that was basically the theme. I believe in the original version of the arcade game, they were just 2 DJs on roller skates, and some gang steals their boombox, and you have to go get it back. I think it was ported to the Genesis, or there might have just been a flyer that had its own backstory, but it was the typical these guys kidnapped your girlfriend and you got to go rescue her. I believe his name was Donald J. Boy. He's the names of the 2 characters are either Bob and Tom, and one is Donald J. Boy and the other is just OJ. There was like a lot of arcade games were back in the day. There was not much of an official backstory because there was no internet back then either. But it was because it was the first arcade. It was a really hard game to play. It was the first arcade game I'd ever encountered where the joystick was on the right-hand side and the attack buttons were on the left-hand side. I thought, since I'm left-handed, this should work out well. No, it went horribly. Okay, the joystick movement on the left-hand side is just natural, so that's probably one of the reasons why I'm cross-dominant. Number 3, a character so obscure that I didn't even know what his name was. I had to go research it. Agent Albatross from the Rolling Thunder game. Rolling Thunder was a game that we played, everybody in my family played. It was in almost every arcade that we went to, even when we went to Japan. That was one of the few games that we were able to play. and it's pseudo. It had its own sequel, like Rolling Thunder 2, and I think there was a Rolling Thunder 3, but there was a spin-off pseudo sequel called Rough Ranger that my dad and I also like to play a lot. That was in an arcade and I think on base. But it was just a classic arcade game where you just don't have much. It was side scrolling, kind of a side scrolling action platformer shooter, but I never got to beat it. So like I think that's something I might have to go look for and find. That it was one of my favorite arcade games as a kid, and I would like to see some kind of if we're not going to get the game coming back in full, some kind of nod to it. But I'm like I said, these are characters I'm not exactly expecting to show up, but I'm putting them in because they're obscure. They're my personal obscurity picks. Number 2, Steve Herman from the game Shatterhand. I mentioned, yeah, most of these characters are going to be from. Most of these characters were on my previous 50 list. Steve Herman, Shatterhand was like a one-shot NES game, super hard but really creative. I really love the idea that this guy had like mechanical arms and you do everything by punching, but you had a robot companion that you had a robot companion that would actually be the projectile launcher, depending on what combination you got. Because you could pick up, you had 3 boxes at the bottom of the screen, and you could get an alpha or a beta, and depending on the combination of those 3 boxes that you got, if it were all alpha or all beta, like there were 8 combinations I think that could get you 8 different robots, and I think it was all alpha that got the grenade one, which was my favorite. So every time you put a punch, it would throw a grenade. But also, if you like held down and pushed A, the robot would float above you, come down, and you would grab it, and you would start to float upward. Think of Snake's up B from Smash Brothers. That's basically how it worked, but it went upward. And then while he was doing that, he could throw it you could throw the robot itself, and it would damage the enemy. But the robot could take damage, so you could actually get it destroyed. So you really didn't want to do that unless it was like a last-ditch effort thing. But it was a really hard game. I think I did get up to the last boss. Because I think there was another thing that could happen where if you collected enough power-ups, you and the robot would combine and you would become like a super robot type, like powered up thing. If you remember Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, if you grab the arcade game, if you grab what's his name, Bubbles, and he turns into the giant robot thing from the movie, and he stays in that powered up state for a while, it was kind of like that. And my number 1 pick overall that I would really like to see is Miria. And now, I don't believe Miria is her actual, like, given name. I don't think the character was actually named. She's from the NES game Guardian Legends, one of my favorite games. Another one of my favorite games from when I was a kid. Super hard, hybrid game where you had a top-down adventure game, kind of Zelda-ish, but you also had, when you had to do some of the boss runs, those were, it was a top-down shoot-'em-up. So it was like two different genres in the same game. It was really creative, super freaking hard, but I did love it. It was again one of my favorite games. Crap. I meant to put him on this list too. I think I erased him because of time constraints. But right. Because he was kind of obscure, but not really. He was an honorable mention. Was Billy Big Bang Blitz from Clash of Demon Head. Most people only know that name because of Scott Pilgrim. Maybe they looked it up, was like, what is that? Like, it's a reference to an NES game. I don't know how many people actually played the NES game, but like me and my cousin Damon, who's the one who owned the Master System that we played Shinobi on, like, we went through so much hell to beat that game. But it was really fun. You had a lot of, like, another side-scroller shooter platformer, but you had powered-up suits that you could use. You actually, there was like a suit that you needed to go into lava. You could go underwater, but like you had an oxygen meter. But if you had the underwater tank, like the underwater suit, you had an oxygen tank so you could stay underwater longer. You had multiple shots. It was a really fun game, and I would like to see something like that. I would like to see another in that series, if not like some kind of HD remake or something like that. Guardian Legend is another one I think could do like a real remake, because I think if Miria was to be brought back into a game today, where you had a side-scrolling adventure, but you could transform into a robot. I think Nier Automata was the closest thing we had to that, but Miria actually transformed into a ship because she was a robot. And I have a fascination with the Pinocchio complex, I guess you could call it. Characters like RoboCop, Pinocchio himself, Data from Star Trek, android characters in general, the Terminator, like those are probably some of my favorite characters because the exploring the what it means to be a human is probably one of my favorite themes in sci-fi in general. So that's it for this particular video for my top 10 obscure characters. I'll try to get I'll be doing all these recordings in one shot, so I will see you in the next one. It'll be my top 10 holy, like, oh my god, I can't believe they did that character. So I'll see you in the next one.